Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So, massive news as Labour revealed the bulk of their plans to make elections fairer and have launched details on their elections bill early in order to get the news out before the summer recess. The Tories immediately panicked and requested an urgent question in Parliament, which is a very useful thing to do, on the last day before summer today. Nigel Farage will be sweating because these new laws will properly clamp down on foreign money in our politics, along with a host of other features which will improve the way we manage our elections. A key part of Labour's efforts to restore what is, let's face it, rock bottom trust in politics. Should really be all over the mainstream media. It won't be though, will it? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. Okay, so I did have a little bit of advance notice of this, so I was able to prepare some of my thoughts. But then the scope of the video massively expanded when Labour took questions about it this morning in Parliament. Now, as regular viewers will know, electoral reform is one of my top personal issues. And although I put a lot of emphasis on voting system reform, there are other reforms needed as well. This bill doesn't change the system of voting, not for House of Commons elections anyway. But we didn't expect it to. In fact, we'd have been surprised if it did. But it does address other major threats to our democracy. The bill is very good news indeed. So let's begin by identifying, so what are the main problems with our elections right now, so that we can see which of Labour's proposals will help. I've talked a bit recently about the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Fair Elections. This is the largest APPG in Parliament, demonstrating the strength of feeling of many MPs across multiple parties, including Labour, that our elections are not fit for the modern age. And they have identified three main problems with our elections. First, the system itself is not fit for purpose. Second, the proliferation of dirty money in politics, particularly foreign money. Third, the level of disinformation. Now, we could add a fourth as well, which is the physical processing of voting has been made more difficult of late. Lots of people were denied a vote at the last general election due to either difficulties with the newly introduced voter ID and delays in postal ballots being sent out, meaning a lot of postal votes didn't count. So 4 broad areas to put right. Let's look at each one and see what Labour are proposing to do about it. Though I will just point out, what they've announced today is not everything in the bill. What happened, I gather, is the government wanted to get this announcement out before the summer, but they're not quite ready on all the details. So some things have been left out of the announcement today, but will be coming after summer. So if it looks like there's a big hole in the provisions of the bill, the voting system aside, because that's going to remain a big hole in the bill, it could just be that they're still working on the details and will add it in later, either when the bill is formally presented or just as amendments later. That is quite common with legislation when you're trying to pass it quite urgently. And in terms of the timing, it does sound like they want this done urgently. The minister was asked if the changes would be in place for next year's local elections. Now, I don't think that's realistic. And she only confirmed that they would be for the next general election. But I see no reason why they shouldn't be in place for 2027. The bill is to be presented this autumn, which means it will have to rattle through Parliament really quite quickly in order to be passed before the end of the session, because the end of the session is expected next May. Any legislation not complete then just gets cancelled. It's deleted. Gone. Bye-bye. Start again. So you would have thought this would have been in the next King's Speech, but it seems Labour are in a hurry to improve elections somewhat sooner, which is encouraging. So let's begin with the electoral system. Now, this bill contains nothing about even ordering a commission to investigate the system by which we elect MPs, but it does include one big change. Mayoral elections, which were changed to first past the post by Boris Johnson, are reverting back to a preferential voting system. And Labour arguments for doing that work just as well for MPs. Now, MPs today from Labour, the SNP and the Lib Dems all asked multiple questions about at least looking at the system of electing MPs. But the minister only said that the government were not looking at it, though one Labour MP did speak in favour of first past the post. But I noticed the minister didn't make arguments in favour of first past the post. But, you know, one Labour MP did. Let's not kid ourselves that this is like Brexit, where the vast majority of Labour would like to rejoin, but having to be strategic. There is genuine support for first past the post in Labour. I think largely from, fueled by self-interest. but it is still minority support. Interestingly, unless I missed it, I don't recall anyone from the Green Party or Plaid speaking, but I think they will be broadly in support as well. But although the bill doesn't directly even begin to change the system for Westminster elections, it gives us plenty of ammunition to argue for it. Because the idea that it makes sense to have a more representative system for electing mayors, but not MPs, that's nonsensical. They're both cases of electing a single person. What works for one works for another. But the bill will deliver on the manifesto promises to give like full voting rights to 16, 17-year-olds. Again, I don't know when that will start to take effect. I doubt for next year, but I see no reason why it can't be in place for at least the 2027 local elections in England, or even any by-elections which might take place in the second half of next year. Second, dirty money in politics. Now, this is the big one. Now, there are some really good moves in the pipeline to address foreign money in particular, but one seems to have been sort of pulled from the statement at the last minute, but that only means they still have some details to work out, not that it's not going to happen. Remember, the reason this is being announced before it's all ready is they wanted the public to know about a lot of it before summer. But there are going to be rules on cracking down on foreign money. The measures I heard about, which haven't been announced in their entirety yet, would absolutely stop Elon Musk donating so much as a fiver to far-right nut jobs in the UK. He might be able to donate a few £100s, but that would be it. And consider the timing of all this. So this elections bill, it was promised in the manifesto. So the Tory MP was going, hey, why are you ramming this out just before summer? Why are you telling the press before us? It's like, mate, it was in the manifesto. So, but it wasn't in the first King's speech. So that meant it wasn't seen as an urgent priority last summer. So it would have been expected to be in the second King's speech because it's still a major piece of legislation. But that hasn't happened. Labour are pushing this legislation during the first session of Parliament when they did not expect to do so. Why? Because something's clearly happened to make Labour decide that electoral reform is more urgent than they thought last summer. And what is the only big shock to the system we've had since then? Elon Musk threatening to dump 80 million quid into Nigel Farage's lap. Some of the other features of this bill are important, but no reason to suggest Labour see it as suddenly more urgent. As long as they're in place for the next general election, they seem happy. The government were expecting to legislate for this mid-Parliament. So pushing this important piece of legislation during the first session, but without having originally planned to do that, that is actually a really good sign. It means Labour are taking the issue of dodgy funding more seriously and more urgently. I will say there were questions about cryptocurrency, which were not really answered to my satisfaction. Crypto is often used for money laundering. And the reason for that is because it's easier to hide. And there were a couple of questions asking if crypto, which is being used by Reform UK, would be banned.
I welcome the measures that take out dark money from our politics, but they will mean nothing unless we move forward aggressively to ban cryptocurrency donations into British politics. They are used for money laundering. They are used to disguise dark money. They have no role in British politics. Will she confirm the elections bill will ban cryptocurrency donations?
Minister. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his work on this through his committee and the issues he's raised. There are already a number of rules in place on political donations, and they must be abided by regardless of the type of donations made, including for cryptocurrency. Our reforms on political finance to further strengthen our democracy will apply to all donations regardless of form, and that includes cryptocurrency.
Now, the government are clearly not going to ban it from their answer because they were talking about, well, the same strict rules will apply to crypto donations as well, which means that there will be such a thing as crypto donations. I see no reason why there should be. I would certainly hope that MPs keep pushing this issue. It's all very well saying the rules have been tightened, but remember, the rules already exist to stop foreign donations. The problem we have at the moment is too many loopholes. So the problem at the moment is overseeing the rules. And that overseeing the rules is harder with cryptocurrencies. Now, pushing this bill earlier than planned it potentially comes with risks. In pushing what is a big piece of legislation so quickly, you could get accusations that, it's not going to get enough scrutiny. Consider that Labour presented their Renters' Rights Bill and Employment Rights Bill last September and October, respectively. They're still going through Parliament. This elections bill aims to clear Parliament in less than half the time. And even though they've announced details today to get some information out there before the summer recess, which begins at the end of today, they've had to pull some parts of it while they work out the details. That being said, neither the Tories nor Richard Tice, who turned up for Reform UK, expressed any concern about the timing from a scrutiny point of view. The Conservative leading the questions was miffed that the government weren't planning to make a statement in Parliament today if they hadn't forced them to, which was a reasonable criticism. But there was no concern about the timing of the legislation as such. This is Labour taking foreign interference in elections very seriously. Nigel Farage will definitely bellyache about this when it comes to Parliament proper. If he can't get easy access to large foreign donations, he could be in trouble. But that will be an opportunity for Labour to point out that Farage is not only opposing workers' rights, privatising the NHS, but also opposing big tax on oil companies, and is now opposing blocking foreigners funding British political parties. Now, unfortunately, as I say, I can't go over all the details of the scheme because Labour have decided to work on it some more over summer. But the new laws will crack down on, for example, fake shell companies. These are used to funnel foreign money into the system. So the idea is you have a company, clearly doesn't do anything. It's not a business. It doesn't actually have any customers or anything. But it's based somewhere where technically you can donate to a British political party. But you don't know where the money's come from. It's got money. You don't know where it's come from. A shell company was used, for example, to fund Robert Jenrick's leadership bid. So things like this should address foreign subsidies in the UK doing the same thing. There is another feature as well, which, as I say, they've not announced. They were going to announce today and then didn't, which will also really clamp down on what classes as a valid British source of funding. So it's really good. It will also require political parties to do due diligence on checking donors who contribute more than £500, I think. So it's not just that it would be illegal for foreign donors to dump money into our elections. Political groups who accept those donations will have a legal duty to check those donors out. After all, it's a bit tricky to prosecute a foreign donor if they're not in the country. But you're saying to the political parties, it's your job to make sure they're kosher, right? We've had cases of obvious shell companies donating recently. This should end when these laws come online. Now, obviously, the enforcement and punishments will be crucial here. The fines for breaking the rules sound like they're going to become very severe, up to £500,000, which is massively more than exists now, and that the Electoral Commission will get back their powers to investigate properly. But the government will need to make sure that it's not just the rules, but the enforcement is robust as well. There will need to be serious oversight over donations. It's not enough to rely on, say, investigative journalists finding things out, exposing wrongdoing 6 months after the election, when it's like potentially too late. That being said, this bill is going to fundamentally change the way donations work in our politics. The fact that it's scaring the shit out of the Tories is telling that there is nothing tinkering around the edges of this bill. In terms of disinformation, there isn't anything specific in the bill, but that could come in for the review of the Online Safety Act. In fact, the Minister also said that the Online Harms Act will play a role, by which I assume she meant the Online Safety Act, because I don't think there's anything such thing as the Online Harms Act. There is provision to ramp up the seriousness of offences related to intimidation of candidates. That's a big feature. In the last few years, we've seen increasing numbers of attacks and threats targeting candidates as well as election officials, even carrying out assaults. The government has said they're going to expand the range of offences and increase sentences. They're going to work with the Crown Prosecution Service to make sure harassment and intimidation of candidates and officials is addressed, because it is becoming now a major issue. It is a serious threat to democracy. And the bill is going to include measures to toughen up those rules, as well as other forms of political interference, but I don't have the details on those yet. Finally, in terms of the issues around actually voting, the physical process of voting. So voter ID is here to stay. Labour had said that before anyway. It would be too politically awkward to change it now, but Labour are just going to massively increase the IDs which are valid. At the last election, people were turning up with like official ID. They thought, well, this is ID I use. But because it wasn't on the list, meant they couldn't vote. It included, for example, veterans' IDs. It included IDs used by young people to prove they're old enough to buy alcohol. And they were going, well, I use these IDs all the time. Why can't I use it here? There were some Tory complaints about the prospect of this expansion, but that's because they rigged their own system to favour demographics which tend to vote Tory and exclude those who tend not to. So the bill will massively ramp up the list of acceptable ID to the point where no valid voters, as long as they turn up with something, should be turned away. The right-wing parties, the only people who objected to this, by the way, the only MPs who objected, were the Conservatives, Reform UK and DUP. In fact, it was a really weird split. You had MPs from Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP all saying, hang on a minute, let's look at the voting system. That was their main bone of contention. And then the Conservatives, Reform UK and the DUP all going, we don't like postal voting because they allege that it's subject to fraud, right? Again, just like there was no evidence that there was any serious fraud that voter ID tackled, there's no evidence that there's fraud of postal votes either. They've been doing this for a while, although the Tories didn't bother to stop it when they were in power, did they? But Richard Tice of Reform UK, he claimed he'd witnessed people taking sacksfuls of postal votes into polling stations. Oh, I see his person just taking sacksfuls of postal votes. Being clear, he's lying. How do I know? It's illegal. The polling stations wouldn't have accepted them. And his lies were called out by Labour's Flo Ashlomi, who is very actively involved as an MP for electoral reform. She basically misused a point of order at the end to call out his lies without actually calling him a lie, because you can't do that in Parliament.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is much to welcome within these proposals to enhance our democracy, particularly around safety of candidates. We at Reform are very much against votes for 16 to 17-year-olds. It's interesting to know that they themselves are completely split down the middle on this issue. But I would urge the Minister, in particular with regard to postal voting, we have grave concerns about the risks to security and the risks of impersonation of postal voting. I myself, Minister, have seen people carry bag loads of postal votes to a polling station on election day. That is surely completely wrong.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's really important for us as members of Parliament to be accurate in our statements. I just wanted clarity. The member for Boston and Skegness mentioned bags of postal votes, but Madam Deputy Speaker, you'll be aware that the Elections Act 2022 and the subsequent SI, which I served on as the Shadow Minister for Democracy, states people handling postal votes will now be limited to handling no more than 5 postal votes for elections plus their own postal votes. Would the Honourable Member for Boston and Skegness want to reflect on that statement of people carrying multiple bags of postal votes?
But he absolutely was lying. He will have had his phone on him. I mean, if he'd have observed this, why didn't he just do some video and take it to the Electoral Commission or the police, right? It's illegal. Hideously illegal. Oh, Richard, you forgot. Oh, you didn't know how to use your video. Oh, you didn't know how to use your video button on your phone. That's interesting, isn't it? So we've only got your word for it. This thing that cannot have possibly happened, right? He didn't do it. It didn't happen. But it is interesting that the right wing always complain about postal votes when most of the people who use them vote Conservative. I suspect they're just worried about Labour encouraging more people, because Labour for the last few years have been actively encouraging other voters to sign up for postal voting. So they may be worried that people from other demographics who might benefit from postal voting, such as people with disabilities, for example, might use them. And in terms of encouraging more people to vote, Labour are making moves towards automatic voter registration.
And it's really important when we have a system where when you move home and before you know it, before you've even unpacked, you can get your council tax bill. It should be easier for you to be registered to vote. The council already have your details, so it's really good. We are looking at a system of making sure that people are registered to vote, because far too long we've knocked on doors, people say they're interested and they're not registered to vote.
Now, it looks like they're going to do this bit by bit through local authorities on a voluntary basis first. So the bill will also make it easier to get people registered, easier to carry out the practical steps needed to vote. As long as you carry something suitable on you, including a bank card, you should not get turned away at the polling stations. Once these rules come online, please be aware you must keep using the current list of acceptable ID until you know for sure that these new rules are in place, which won't be for a while yet. Could be a couple of years, right? But at least it's coming. And it should all be in place for the next general election. So we'll still have to use the very broken first past the post system. If you want to know more about why it no longer works, I've got a video explainer on that available. But we will see an expansion of voting rights to 16-year-olds. We will be clamping down on foreign donations. They are technically already illegal, as I say, and as one Tory MP pointed out. But the fact Elon Musk could openly talk about donating $100 million to Reform UK shows how worthless the current rules are. You didn't have any great, oh, but that would be illegal, that'd be silly. No, 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 the threat was taken seriously, and the Tories know it. This is why they're alarmed. Imagine only being able to take donations from genuinely UK sources. No more rubles flooding the zone, no more dollars either.
This government was elected on a manifesto that committed to granting 16-year-olds the right to vote and protecting our democracy from foreign money. So can I remind the honourable gentleman that his party lost the general election in the worst general election defeat for decades. It's no wonder that the party opposite are scared of the electorate. The truth is, young people deserve to have a stake and to have a say in the future of our democracy. Young people can vote for any party they like, and it speaks volumes that the honourable gentleman would prefer for them to be silenced. Can I also remind the House that it was his party that sat in government for 14 years and did nothing to close the gaping loopholes, allowing foreign interference and foreign money to enter our system. This is despite independent experts calling for change. The Intelligence and Security Committee's Russia report exposed malign efforts to channel foreign money into UK politics. Both the Committee on Standards in Public Life and the Electoral Commission have called for strengthened regulations and greater transparency in political donations, alongside modernised enforcement. We make no apologies for finally taking the tough choices and to protect Britain's democracy from malign foreign interference. The real question for the honourable gentleman is, will his party finally end their addiction to donations from shell companies? Under these laws, new laws, they won't have a choice, and we won't stop there. They will finally have to update their weak due diligence checks and conduct enhanced checks.
If foreign billionaires want to influence our future elections, they'll just have to buy a newspaper like the old days. Oh, but even that's not allowed anymore. Oh dear, how sad, never mind. So the mechanical process of voting will be made much easier. If Labour can promote these moves, as they indicated they would at least to younger voters through a range of outlets, we might see an increase in participation at the next election. Of course, if we really want to get the public excited about voting, we need to do more to make people feel their vote counts. Now, being clear, it does count if you use it in a particular way, but it should count being able to use it in whatever way the voter chooses. But this is all very good news. I cannot even identify anything that I have seen which I think is bad. All of the provisions of this bill are good. They're all improvements, and some of them are massive improvements. There are just absences of things I think are still needed. It's definitely a big step towards making elections fairer and more transparent and more accountable. But more will be needed before we're done. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.